Welcome to another episode of Culinary School Stories, the weekly podcast that is dedicated to sharing the stories of people around the globe whose lives have been influenced, impacted, touched, and or enriched, for good or for bad, from their culinary school experience. Hi, my name is Colin Roach, and I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. You are an important part of this show, where we ask the question, what's your culinary school story? So now, without any further delay, let's meet today's guest. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of the Culinary School Stories podcast, a proud member of the Food Media Network. And if you have not yet subscribed to the show, please do so. It is free, and we would love to have you as part of our community. You can also subscribe or follow the show through your favorite podcast apps, such as Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or you can do it through our website at www.culinaryschoolstories.com, which is also where we store all of the podcast's past episodes and our guests' bios and contact information. So be sure to check out the website and sign up for our free monthly newsletter. So now I'd like to introduce today's guest, who grew up on the west coast of Florida, just outside of Tampa. After culinary school, he went on to the workforce to gain experience and perfect his skills. After quickly climbing through the ranks at several different types of properties, he eventually ended up as the corporate executive chef for the Melting Pot restaurant at the young age of 25. However, after 7 years in that role, when he opened up hundreds of restaurants in numerous countries, he moved on to take on the position of corporate chef and vice president of culinary strategy at First Watch Restaurants, where he currently is today. And with that said, I would now like to welcome Chef Shane Schaibly to the show. Shane, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Chef. It's great to hear your voice and see you again.
Yeah, we got a lot to catch up on here. So why don't we tell the listeners where you started? How did your love of food materialize? Was it a young age, later on in life? And how did that get you to culinary school?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents, they divorced when I was 6 years old. So I was raised by my mom primarily, go see my dad on the weekends and things like that. So my mom was raising two boys, and my brother and I, he's 18 months younger than me. She's a huge coach, and she's a teacher in a Catholic school. So, my dad was a cop. Home life was pretty strict, but we were always on the run. We were always doing sports of some kind. So there wasn't, this great memory of home cooked meals every single night at the dinner table. That wasn't how we were raised. But I think, my early love of really good food has to be attributed to one of my ex-girlfriends. And, I dated the same girl from 8th grade till I was 21. And I'd known her since kindergarten. Her family was a great family friend. And they did have family meals, and they went to great restaurants all the time. They had, he had the dad, Dr. G, he had 4 kids. So they would go to Burns and places like that and take me along at a young age. And it just amazed me what was going on in these restaurants. I'd never seen anything like that in my life before. And I think thinking back now, that's the first time I really saw proper service and actual beautiful plated dishes and composed dishes. So I think that's the first time it really resonated with me.
Oh, great. And so then you started cooking because now you were a connoisseur. Now you got into the business. And what was your first job? Dishwasher, like many of us, or you're a line cook?
Man, busboy for sure. So I was 14 years old, and I got in a little bit of trouble with my mom. And basically, she said, "You're grounded. The only way you're getting out of this house is if you get a job." Obviously thinking this 14-year-old kid's not going to get a job. So she went in her room. I went out to the garage. I got on my bike and I rode to the closest thing, which happened to be a traditional German restaurant. Right on the corner. It was, a 7-minute or 8-minute bike ride for me. And traditional German restaurants in Dunedin, Florida, it was called Mad Coughs. And the chef's name was Eric Koff. And he named his restaurant Mad Coughs. He was crazy. Straight off the boat, just yelling and everything that all the stereotypical things you think of when you think of German chef. It was him. And I rode my bike to the back door, and I knocked on the door, and he answered the door, and I said, "I want a job. I have an application." And I was really skinny, lanky kid. And he stood there in the door. He had a cigarette in his mouth. He looked me up and down. was like, "You're too skinny to work in the kitchen," and slammed the door. So I rode my bike to the front of the restaurant, and I went in the front door, and the girl, a young girl who was bartending out, her name was Abby. She must have been like 21 or 22 or something. And I asked her if she had an application if they were hiring. She said, "Yeah, absolutely." She let me know. She's like, "Do you know how to bar back?" I said, "Yeah, you just grab ice and stuff, right?" She's like, "Yep." So I filled out the application, and she hired me basically to be a busboy or be a bar back in the front of the house. So
unbeknownst to the chef who's in the back.
Unbeknownst to the chef, yeah, and he came out a couple hours into my first shift. He was like, "What are you doing here? You're too little to work in the kitchen." I said, "Oh, Abby hired me in the front. I'm going to work in the front." And that was that. I mean, I absolutely fell in love with the restaurant industry from that moment on. Like busboys, we were making Caesar salads, like, dressing from scratch every single time, everything into the wooden bowl, toss. We were making desserts, apple strudel and stuff like that. And it was just, I don't know, the love and all of it, the love, the anger, the excitement, like everything that went on in the restaurant just amazed me. Like people were super welcoming and everyone in the front of the house, especially, like, wanted to take care of, me and my buddy started at the same time. We wanted to take care of these two young kids and like teach us the ropes and let us know what was going on. But Eric he was a great chef in his own right, for sure. But it was a different time, right? So this is probably like 96, maybe 95, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he would drink Beck's beer from a pitcher and have it up on his station on the line. He would smoke cigarettes on the line. And when his pitcher was gone, he would yell from the kitchen to the front, "Abby, bring me a Beck's." And sure enough, Abby would run back there with a new pitcher of Beck's. And like, I saw things happen in that restaurant. I saw knives get thrown. I saw saute pans get thrown, and it never scared me away. Like I don't know. I felt it. It spoke to me. So that was where I fell in love.
Yeah, the craziness, the chaos. It's pretty exciting.
Exactly right.
So then you kept working, and at some point, light bulb or a mentor or someone must have mentioned culinary school. And take us to how that materialized, going and enrolling. And
yeah, I from there I moved on and went to another little local restaurant. It was called Sundance Bar and Grill, and it was a restaurant on in a marina. So you had all these like old salty dog fishermen, and same deal. Like bartenders are doing all kinds of crazy things at the restaurant. It's just like all the restaurant stories that you want were there. And it was a guy named John was the kitchen manager, and it was like 5 of us boys who were in high school, and we effectively ran this kitchen, right? And some of us were able to have, a work study program so we can open the kitchen at like 10 a.m. and then the rest of us would close it at night. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. So I think, that was the first time, and John, gave all of us an opportunity, and that was the first time that it was like, all right, this is a path. This is something that I can do. I love doing it. It turns out I'm good at it. I can handle myself on the line. And John explained, hey, you either go to culinary school, you get your piece of paper and you work your way through the ranks that way, or you go work for someone who has some street cred and you skip the whole school thing. You save a lot of money, but it's a harder path. Mm-hmm. And he would always tell us boys this, if you guys want an opportunity, I'm happy to give it to you. I know people in New Orleans and like Tahoe and whatever. So, fast forward all the way through high school, when it comes time to start choosing your life path. And I, told my parents, I want to go to culinary school. And my mom being a teacher and my dad being a cop, both of them in separate conversations were like, absolutely not. You're a super smart kid. You're not gonna go waste your college years in a culinary school learning to cook. Like it wasn't a thing yet. You had Emerald, right. You had Julia Childs, but there was no Food Network, there was no Celebrity Chef. That sort of thing hadn't really taken hold yet. So I think it was still viewed by most people as a little bit of a lower class job. Mm-hmm. And I did great in school. I loved school. I took architecture for 4 years in high school. We had a great architecture program at my high school. And basically, I was told I couldn't go to culinary school. So I ended up applying to quote unquote real college. I got accepted to Auburn University. I got a full academic scholarship.
Wow.
And, I went. and I put my dreams, I guess, on hold for a little while, and I went to Auburn. And I loved it. I loved my regular classes, but because I'd done architecture for 4 years, they were trying to teach me how to sketch trees and stuff. And I was like, look at my portfolio. Look, can I take higher classes or clip out of this or anything? And basically they told me, we don't really care what you did in high school in Florida. You should have gone to college in Florida. So I, stopped going to my classes, and turns out if you don't go to your classes, they take your scholarship away. And, I came home and I tried real college again at a junior college here in Tampa. And by the end of that, my mom was basically like, look, you spent all the money we had saved for you for college. You do whatever you want. You're on your own. And I was like, thank you. So I can go to culinary school. And I went online, I did some research, and I found, an amazing lady who's still a great friend to this day. Her name's Robin Pfeiffer. She's a recruiter for Johnson & Wales. She lived in the Tampa Bay area, and I reached out to her, and I was 21 years old, and I basically explained my situation, my story. I have no money, and I love culinary. I love working in restaurants. I've done it since I was 14, blah, blah, blah. And I need help. And she said, all right, well, we can get you help. And she did. She said, hey, fill out this paperwork, write these essays, gave me all of the tools I needed to make sure that I could pay my way in culinary school, and basically got me an interview with Johnson & Wales. And I mean, I'll never forget every single time I go down to that area of Tampa. It's called West Shore. I met Robin, and it was kind of like a recruiting session, I guess. And they would review your transcripts and interview you in person. And basically give you an acceptance right there on the spot. And I haven't forgotten what I was wearing. Like, I remember I was so nervous, so terrified that they were going to tell me no, I couldn't go to this culinary school. Oh my God. And it was the easiest interview in the world. It was so great. And they were so they were so happy to have me. And I was like, I've been stressing about this for weeks. But anyway, so they accepted me, and I ended up going in the fall of 2003. Again, I was 21 years old, and I'd already tried real college. This is kind of my last shot, but I was ready, and I loved it, and I loved Miami, and it was awesome.
Now, did your parents, I'm guessing, we're jumping ahead here, came around at some point, right, and said, this is good for him?
Absolutely. I think, as all parents, they were proud that I'd taken some steps on my own, and then I was moving in the right direction, and college is college. And, by that point, like, so much had changed, right? I don't know what year Food Network rolled out or whatever, but the role of a chef, or the idea of a chef, had become more. Yeah. So I think it was a little bit more widely accepted.
Now you're a celebrity, right? Now everybody wants to do
it. Right.
So had you visited the campus before that meeting, or did you go down and visit? I know they have a lot of orientations and stuff.
I went down for Wildcat Weekend after I had been accepted, and visited, and kind of did the tour and all those things. They put me up at the Westin Diplomat, and man, I'd never seen a hotel like that in my life.
That's a pretty big thing, right? People come in, it's right on the beach.
It was a very big thing. It's crazy, man. It was wild. And my mom came down there with me, and I don't know. I emailed you a couple photos, so I have those photos from Wildcat Weekend, and there was a bathtub that you could open the window and you could watch the TV from the back. It blew my mind. I couldn't believe that this was. I'd never seen anything like that in my life. So it just made a huge impact on me. And all the instructors I met, of course, Robin was down there to welcome me, and everyone was so great and felt like me personally, with open arms. Yeah. And so it just felt like the right fit for me.
That's like the hospitality industry in general, right? It's like, you go work at a restaurant, they take everybody.
Exactly.
So what was the first day like when you got to campus? Because you were older, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the students are right out of high school, 18, so that must have, been something. But you get in, they give you the knife kits, the uniforms, they give you a schedule, and take us through that, and maybe the listeners that are have not gone to culinary school yet, kind of what that is, what it entails.
Yeah. I mean, it was. So I grew up going to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade, and uniforms, and your hair couldn't touch your collar or flop down by your ears or anything like that. So I was used to uniforms and that sort of thing. So that didn't really bother me. In fact, I knew how to iron. I was good. Clean shaven face every single day. And when they're like laying these things out, you can see in these kids' eyes, they're freaking terrified, And it didn't bother me. I was ready to roll. So yeah, uniforms and make sure everything's pressed. And I mean, hell, some of these kids probably never even plugged in an iron.
Yeah.
And you saw it. And you saw quickly in the first set of labs, like who
needed some help,
who'd had to do this in their life before, and who'd really been pampered and taken care of their whole entire life.
Yeah, it's like the saying is like no earrings, no long nails, and they're like, "Oh, I can't take this out. This earring's in." It's like, well,
yeah,
you want to go to culinary school, it's going to come out.
Yeah, it was to a certain extent, a lot like the military, right? And it didn't matter to me. I was ready for it, but I do remember my first class was Chef Lazar in meat cutting, and he was awesome, man. I was terrified. I was so intimidated by all of you guys, by all of you chefs, with your tall hats and your long sleeves, and but Chef Lazar, again, just like, he's such a cool guy. I mean, we stay in touch still to this day. When I open restaurants around him, I make sure and get him an invite to it and things like that. But like, he was just so open and it felt like honest about the industry and like, hey, here's how it's going to be. And it was great. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea of, school for 4 days and then you have the weekend off so you can work in the industry. Like the idea of this as my college was great. It was almost like a vacation. Like, It was so crazy to me when all my other friends were grinding and, they've been in college for 2 years and it was really 3 years. And some of them, it was so rough on them all. I loved it. And it was pretty cut and dry. Like, hey, don't skip class. You can't miss more than, you can't miss 2 classes. You can miss 1 day out of your 9-day lab, right? But you can't miss 2. So, okay, the rules are pretty simple, pretty cut and dry. Be clean shaven, press your jacket. Like, all right, I'm ready to go here. And I like that we were with the same crew, through that first round of labs. I think that was great for me. I made lifelong friends, and as a matter of fact, I'm going up to Providence here in a couple of weeks to visit my roommate from culinary school, who actually ended up going to Providence, getting his 4-year, then getting his master's. He runs Mount Snow in Vermont. His name's Mike Giorgio, and he was a great friend I met in my first set of labs. And then, as a matter of fact, my Heinz national accounts rep, his name is Tom Pilla. He also, I met him that first round of labs in culinary school. So, like I said, I have lifelong friends that I met during that first round.
And it's really a small industry,
yeah.
The hospitality, the restaurant business. So, you graduate with people, you most likely going to run into them somewhere, at a convention or, through the
exactly,
work industry. So it's great. Yeah. And going back to the instructors, and a lot of people don't know that may be listening to this, the chefs, Gordon Ramsay, they have a reputation sometimes, but, culinary instructors, they're teachers.
Yeah.
They've changed. So they're welcome. They want to pass that information on. So some people come in and they're scared. And yes, there is an intimidation, the big hats and all that. But for the most part, when they hire instructors out there for all the culinary schools, they're teachers first and they really care about the students and their well-being. And so, and I'm sure you saw that pretty quick as you, but that first intimidation until you get there. And then once you meet them.
For sure. I mean, but you also hear, you hear stories, you hear rumblings. And so I because I was 21, I had to stay in Emerald, which for the listeners, so like when you're right out of high school, they'll put you in Flamingo, which is, dorms. But the dorms, like you go downstairs your elevator and you're in your classroom. Like they really tried hard to not allow you to stray.
Keep you close.
Yeah. They didn't want anyone, wandering off. And at that point, the campus was very, very different than it is today. If you wandered too far, it was a dangerous neighborhood. But so anyway, so I stayed in Emerald. So I stayed with a bunch of older kids, and my 3 roommates were in their second year already. And so they were like, oh, let me see who you have. Let me see who you have. Like, oh man, Hensley, he's ruthless, and so you had this like idea in the back of your head and these horror stories. But Chef Hensley too, just an awesome, great guy. And I'm big, so I'm like 6'5", 6'6", whatever, 250 pounds, and I think Chef Hensley liked that I was almost as big as him.
Yeah, you can look eye to eye or even look up.
Yeah, I could see eye to eye with him. But they also, him especially, he would view the credit card on your face to make sure you had no stubble to prove that you shaved that morning. So, and I had no problem. I always, clean shaven. And like I said, press my jacket. So I think that like, set me apart in his eyes. So I might've gotten a little bit of a pass on that one.
Yeah. So what was the first class? That was meat cutting?
Yeah. First class was meat cutting. And I as a matter of fact, in preparation for this, I went and pulled my transcripts. So it appears as though I got a B+ in meat cutting, but yeah, that first round, I also had Dixie for dining room, and I think principles of beverage service. She was doing that as well.
Dixie Marsala and Eve Peridot.
Yeah, and again, she was awesome. She was so great and like welcoming and like you said, like truly all about the hospitality industry. And she definitely sticks out for me there as well.
And so knowledgeable, so much skill they bring to the program, to the students, from their backgrounds.
Yep.
Great. So you stayed on for the 2 years. What did you do for your internship, your externship that you had to do during those 2 years?
Yeah. So the first year, you go 4 days on and then you have 3 days off so you can work in the industry. So I took that as drive home every weekend and party with your friends. So my whole first year of culinary school, effectively, I was driving home like every weekend. I mean, it was a 4-hour drive across Alligator Alley and up 75. It was, pretty easy and uneventful. But I mean, you could get out of if you had morning labs, you could get out of your morning lab around 1, right, on Thursday.
Sure.
And I would be home and be able to hang with my friends Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and drive back home to Miami. So that's basically what I did my whole first year. And my mom just like, Shane, what are you doing? You're supposed to be working. And one of my roommates at Emerald, he had a friend who had a catering business, and they were doing like crazy catering events in Fort Lauderdale on yachts. And I would go work, a Wednesday night and walk with like $250 cash. And so I had money coming in. And so I didn't really have to find a quote unquote real job that whole first year. But in between, when I came home, I ended up working for a chef here called Chris Ponte. And he had a restaurant called Café Ponte. He was also a Johnson & Wales grad from up in Providence, and he went to Cordon Bleu in Paris. And just an awesome guy and a great chef and great friend and mentor to me still to this day. So I worked for him all summer. And then when I came back, it was time to do my externship. So you get, I guess it's like a lottery draw where you could either get your externship at the beginning of the year or the middle semester or the end. And I ended up pulling it first in the fall, which was awesome. And I don't know how it happened, but by the, through the grace of God or whoever was watching out for me, I got an externship at the Ritz-Carlton on South Beach.
Awesome.
And as at that point, a 22-year-old culinary student, I tell people, when they hear, oh, you worked at the Ritz-Carlton? I did. I was below the bottom rung on the totem pole. So like you were, on Sundays, I'm cracking, I don't even know, 525, I think was the number, 525 stone crab claws. You're shucking, 1,000 oysters for this big, beautiful buffet. You're working the buffet, you're working the omelet station. You got to get there at like 4:30 in the morning. And I distinctly remember, you couldn't park on anywhere near the hotel. So you had to find parking somewhere on South Beach, right? Pay someone and then walk to work. And I would walk with my knives under my arm, head down, 4:30 in the morning. And I will never forget seeing my friends drunk, leaving clubs, walking back towards their car. And I was crossing them on the opposite side of the street. I just remember putting my head down and like, this is going to pay off someday. This is going to pay off someday. And, here we are. So I guess it did.
It paid off.
But it was fantastic, man. The whole experience of working at the Ritz was awesome. My chef there, Thomas Connell, is a great, fantastic, chef and just like a great human being, and he taught me so much. I mean, there was no reason for the executive chef of the Ritz-Carlton to hang out and spend time with a kid who's in culinary school. But man, it stuck out in my head every single morning. Chef Thomas would get there, and no matter who was working, he would walk the line, the dish pit, everywhere, and shake the hand of every single cook, every dishwasher, porter, whatever. And just, 2 minutes. Hey, Shane, how's it going? How's school going? have you been back home to see the family? Like, this guy even knows that I would go up to Tampa and see the family. Like, it just really stuck out in my mind. And he was so helpful as a chef, and really, helped me through that process. And there, you hear horror stories of, you go do your externship and all you're going to do is peel potatoes or onions, or Juliet onions for, 8 hours a day, and then they send you home. But man, he let me work in every single kitchen, from garde manger to banquets to the 2 feature restaurants, absolutely amazing feature restaurants. And he embraced I think the teaching part. And, what I found really unique about the Ritz-Carlton is they have almost a revolving door of chefs. So like the story goes, after 5 years, if you're a salaried chef, they don't force you, but they strongly encourage you to go anywhere else in the world. They'll relocate you, your family. And what that created was this revolving door, chefs from all over the world. And I was working with chefs from South Africa and Colombia and in Mexico and Europe. And it was awesome. And you get to hear about their experiences and their ingredients, at the Ritz. Food cost is not really of the utmost concern there. So that, these chefs who had these higher positions, if they were from Australia and they wanted to bring in a fish or something, or a lamb or whatever from Australia, they fly it in. So you get to put your hands on and work with all these crazy ingredients and, octopus and all, just, I don't know. It was so fun and exciting for me. I really, really enjoyed my time there. And then, afterwards, I retained my position and became a cook after my internship. So I did stay there for about 1.5 years after.
So that was about 22, 23 at that point?
Yep, 22 years old.
And then it was a quick jump to corporate chef of the Melting Pot, right? It was a 2-year period between that. What happened then, and how did you find that job?
Man, so I I came back. So I did my 2 years, right? And then I wanted to do 4, but I had this girlfriend, and she wanted to move back to Tampa, and I moved back to Tampa for her, which never ever works out. So if there's advice I'm going to give to any culinary student, don't listen to your girlfriend. But anyway, so I moved back home, and I loved the Ritz so much, and there was no Ritz-Carlton in Tampa, so we have this beautiful hotel here called the Don Cesar, very famous, on St. Pete Beach. And so I had a friend who also went to Johnson Wales, a family friend, and I was going to try and get a position at the hotel. But I ended up talking to my chef, Chris Ponte, from Café Ponte, and let him know I was coming home. And he was like, "Hey man, I really need a pastry chef. Can you come to the restaurant and work for me?" And I was like, no, chef, thank you. But I'm not a pastry chef, man. It's not my thing. And he was like, "Don't worry about it. I'll teach you everything you need to know. I really need some help right now. And if you help me out here, I'll make sure I'll pay you back later on." And I was like, really don't want to, but all right, I'll give it a whirl. So I go to Café Ponte, and chef effectively hands me this binder, this huge, 2-inch full ring binder full of recipes, and said, "All right, here's all the recipes. I have a trip to Napa. I'll be back in a couple weeks." And he basically handed me this book of recipes, which were his recipes from when he was in France, all in French, all in metric, and left me to my own devices to figure out this pastry stage.
Thanks.
And so I did. And and he came back from his Napa trip and ended up working with me very closely. And he's, like I said, just a great friend and mentor. So I ended up staying with him for about 2 years. And towards the end of those 2 years, the owners of the Melting Pot, which is based in Tampa, would come to the restaurant all the time. They love the restaurant, and they would bring their families or vendors or whatever. And they asked Chef. He had 2 restaurants at the time. They said, "Hey, would you be interested in being corporate chef for us?" And he said, "No, I don't really have time for that. I have 2 of my own restaurants, but there's this young kid in the back. He's pretty smart. He's got a lot of ambition. You should talk to him." And they said, "All right, we'll tell him to get us a resume." And at that point, my resume said, Café Ponte and Ritz-Carlton, kind of. But I did. I felt that they were basically. I was like, "Look, chef, I don't want to go to the corporate world. I'm a diehard. At that point, like line cook, chef. Like I love the grind of the independent restaurant. I love it." And I said, "The corporate world's not for me." And at that point, I'd already covered myself in tattoos, and it just didn't seem like
weren't fitting the mold.
Yeah, it just didn't seem like a fit for me, right? He said, "Look, man, this could be the biggest opportunity of your life." At that point, I had a bleach blonde mohawk, and he was like, "Go cut your hair, go buy a nice shirt, and sit down and talk to these guys." And I did that, and these guys were great. And it was two brothers, Mark and Bob, and then Mike. He was the vice president of operations at the time. And they're sitting across the table from me, and I'm explaining like what I've done and how hard I work, blah blah blah. And they're like, "Look, we're not sure if this is gonna pan out. Let's give it 3 months. And if it doesn't work out from our end, Chef already said he'd give you your job back. And if you don't like it for whatever reason, you can leave, and no hard feelings." And I was like, all right, I basically have nothing to lose.
Right.
Now I'll never forget getting that phone call. It was in like February or March, maybe. It was Mardi Gras. And Dunedin, the town I grew up in, has a huge Mardi Gras celebration. I got that phone call. They told me what I was going to be making. And man, I hung up and I was like, oh. I just sat down on the curb and I was like, I've made it. Like, what am I going to do with all this money? I can't believe that I've made it. And it was not a huge salary. But
it was bigger than a line cook, right?
Right. It was such a jump. And like, there's insurance and like a salary, like you don't clock in. It was wild. So anyway, that's how it went. In those first 3 months, I worked at Café Ponte still at night. So Chef wouldn't let me leave until I trained 2 people, which it took 2 people to do my job. But at that point, I'd moved on. I was doing catering and working every station and everything else there. But so I would go to the office and office from 8 to like 5. And then I would haul ass over to Café Ponte and work the shift from 6 to like 10 or 11, go home, sleep, and do it all over again. So I was grinding even those first 3 months. But
that was his way of repaying you, right? Because he said he was going to repay you one. So he did you right.
It seems like a pretty fair trade-off given the path that I've been on.
Now, you took the position as pastry chef with him. Did you only have the experience from culinary school? Did you have 2 classes?
Crazy, right? That's it. But I had worked for him the previous summers. I mean, he knew I was a hard worker, and he knew I was smart, and I could figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick pause right now and ask you, the listener of this episode, to sign up for our newsletter and mailing list. I left a link in the description, or it may be even easier just to go to www.chefroach.com/contact. That's chefroach, all one word, .com/contact. Then just go to the bottom of the page and sign up for our newsletter. It's free. Then once you're signed up, you'll never miss out on our latest news, announcements, episodes, contests, course information, or exclusive deals. So go ahead, sign up so you can get all of the information and more through the periodic email updates. And don't worry, you can always unsubscribe if you don't like it. The link again is www.chefroach.com/contact. So go ahead, do it now. We want you to be part of our community. And if you don't do it now, you'll probably just forget by the time this episode is over. So just hit the pause button right now and take the 15 to 20 seconds to get it done, and then come back and hit play. We'll wait for you, I promise. Okay, hopefully you just did it, or you've already done it in the past, or at the very least, you'll be doing it very soon. Your support of the show and the network is very important to us, and we thank you in advance. Alrighty, so now back to the show.
So now how is this corporate job now? Now you're going into, and you have multiple restaurants, and you opened a lot of restaurants, and you had a lot of travel in there too, right? So yeah. How did that change your life?
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, I remember going to that first NRA show that May. So it started in like March, and went to that first NRA show, and it blew my mind. I couldn't believe that there was all that stuff there. And
this is in Chicago?
Yeah, in Chicago. Yeah. And people were taking us out to these restaurants, these crazy restaurants. So it was awesome. And I have to give, so much credit to my boss at the time. And eventually he became the president of the company, but his name's Mike Lester, and just an all around great guy. And he saw, I think he saw the potential in me and really let me learn at my own pace, but he had been a JVP for Outback up in the Ohio market. He had 20 or 30 restaurants or something like that. And, he knew that I didn't know anything about the corporate world, but he also knew or saw that there was an opportunity to kind of mold me, and he did. And I brought a lot of what I had learned from Chef and from my time at the Ritz about relationships and treating vendors and suppliers and distributors with respect, which, unfortunately in the corporate side of the business, especially at that point in time, it didn't really happen very often.
It was more about the money and just straight business transactions.
It was a lot about the money. It was a lot about, shaving pennies and nickels off of a price per pound. And I'd heard horror stories about it, and I knew that that's how some of the industry worked. But I really brought the idea, or I made it part of my being. Hey, treat these guys with respect, and it'll foster a long-term relationship. And it did. And we didn't pinch pennies, we didn't cut corners, we didn't RFP product every year. And I think that really gave me I guess a good name in the industry early on. But yeah, we were opening a lot of restaurants. We were selling a lot of international franchises. I mean, I was traveling to Canada and Mexico opening restaurants. I spent a ton of time in Mexico City. I opened 3 restaurants down there, and I went to Indonesia and Dubai, Saudi Arabia. I got a beautiful trip to Switzerland from our cheesemaker. We spent 2 weeks just traveling all around Switzerland. I went to Gruyere, where Gruyere cheese with building block of fondue was born, and it was just so cool. I love the education part of it. I loved learning. I by no means thought that I knew all there was to know, because how could I? I was so young, but I was so hungry.
Right.
And obviously at Melting Pot we use a lot of cheese, right? So I would go to Wisconsin probably 3-4 times a year, every single year, and just do everything. They made me do it all. They made me, go to the farm. They made me, I've shoveled poop. I've cleaned stalls. I've worked with the cheesemakers starting at 3:00 in the morning, accepting the milk in the truck. Just wanted to learn the process, what goes into this thing called cheese. So another great friend and mentor, his name is Reggie Heiss. He was the corporate chef for Emmy Roth case at that point in time. And he really took me under his wing and helped show me the ropes on the industry and how things work. So yeah, it was a good 7 years.
Met him a couple times and spent some time at Emmy Roth, and they're great people out there.
He's amazing, man. He's he's an educator, right? He wants people to learn and to know as much as they can about food. And he was a road warrior too. He was spending so much time on the road, and so he really taught me how to work in other people's kitchens, and how to respect what they're doing. You go to an event, you do an event for 200 people in someone else's hotel. You can't just roll in there and take their speed racks. And, so there's a dichotomy that exists that you have. Respect is so important in the industry. And he really taught me a lot about that.
So what was the role they really wanted you for? Was it just to open properties, new properties? Was it to be more of a figurehead? Was it to come up with new recipes, combination?
It was actually, a combination. There's a lot of menu ideation and creation, finding spec products, improving quality. So, I was working with different suppliers, sauces and spices and seasonings, dressings, those guys, to refine, Melting Pot's been around for 30 something years. So to refine these old school recipes and kind of make them a little bit more current. We did a thing called the Big Night Out, which is basically like a limited time offer. And we changed that menu every 6 months, and it was themed around some region of the world. So there would be an Asian Big Night Out. And, so I was doing a lot of development of cheese fondue, salad and dressing, the marinades and spices and rubs on the meats, because, obviously the customer's cooking everything. And then the chocolate fondue. So I wanted to be an expert in cheese. I want to be an expert in chocolate. And that they really allowed me to do those things. And in the course of those 7 years, we opened and created a Better Burger concept. It was kind of in the height of the Better Burger era. The brand is called Burger 21. And, Chef Ponte was the originator. He was the first one. And so he created the brand. And then I eventually ended up running that brand until I left. But I got to cook still. It wasn't all fondue.
It wasn't all at the desk.
Exactly.
Now you then you transitioned. You did 7 years there, opened a lot of properties. Did well for yourself, did well for the company.
Yeah.
Then you had this other opportunity come up with First Watch. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, my wife and I had, we'd had our first child, Jack. He's 9 years old now. And we found out we were pregnant with my daughter, Olive. And, my wife was also working for the company. As a matter of fact, she was my server trainer when I started at Melting Pot. So that's a whole other podcast, I'm sure. But industry relationships, maybe.
Yeah.
But she basically was like, hey, we can't have another year like we had last year. I was traveling 2-3 weeks at a time and all over the world. And, when you're in Indonesia and something happens, there is no hop on a plane and come home.
Right.
It's really far. And so anyway, so we started talking about our options. I actually really loved the corporate world and I wanted to stay in it. And we started looking at cities where that had the highest concentration of corporate offices, right? And, we're looking at Denver and Dallas and Orlando, Atlanta. We'd accepted that we would have to move to one of those cities. And we were both okay with that. And so I reached out to some friends in these cities and I said, hey, I'm going to start looking confidentially. And if you know of anything, let me know. And one of my friends, her name's Kendra Cheer, and she was in Dallas. And she basically told me, you don't have to leave Florida. You should go talk to Chris down at First Watch. And Chris Tomaso, who's now our president and CEO, was the chief marketing officer at the time. And they'd known each other from just being in the industry. She was a marketing person. So was he. And she said, they're looking for a corporate chef. And so I said, the breakfast place? And she was like, yeah, the breakfast place. And for a long time, I put it off. I think like 3 weeks went by. And I'm like, I'm very mistakenly so.
They're right there, though, right? Next to Tampa, they're Bradenton. They're right there in that area.
Yeah, Sarasota. Yeah. It's close by. It's an hour away. But in my mind, like, sadly, I was like, it's kind of lowbrow for me. I'm not going to go from running these 150 restaurants in 5 countries. And, I was running this massive wine program at Melting, but like to go to a breakfast place that didn't even have alcohol, it was crazy to me. Yeah. But anyway, so I finally said, all right, I'll go talk to this guy and just at least have breakfast with him and see what it's all about. And we sat down to have breakfast and he basically said to me, so, really nice to meet you. Kendra has great things to say about you. What do you know about the brand? And I just told him, it just first thing that came to my mind. I told him, I know that's where my grandma takes me for breakfast. And he laughed and he was like, that's a really weird thing to say in an interview. I was like, look, man, like I'm an honest guy, I'm going to shoot you straight. But that's what I knew about the brand. And it was true. My grandmother had taken me to First Watch and that's kind of all I knew about it. And he said, we're getting that a lot lately. And, we want to make sure that we can change and evolve and keep up with the times. And he showed me a drawing on his phone. It hadn't even been built yet. Wow. He showed me a sketch on his phone of a restaurant in North Kansas City. It was wild. They were going to remodel this restaurant because the roof had fallen in. It was such an old restaurant. The snow pack had made the roof fall in. And they had plans already that they were going to completely remodel it. So they basically took this opportunity to go ahead and pull the trigger. And this restaurant was beautiful. The drawings of it were like, wow, that was nothing like any First Watch I'd ever seen before. At that point, we were pastel colors and fake grass here and there. And it was a very 90s feel to things. And luckily our founder, Ken Pendry and Chris saw that and said, it's time to evolve. And when he showed me that drawing, and basically what he said was, look, we want someone who can make the food keep up with the design, someone who's young and you have a great reputation in the industry. And we really think it would be a good fit. At that point, we had, I think, 114 restaurants. And I really liked that idea. And I asked him how many franchisees we had. And he told me, and it wasn't very many. And, and I said, how much control do I have? And he said, all of the control. I said, who do I report to? He said, me and only me. And I was like, all right, you know what? Let's do this. Let's do it. And I mean, it was thinking back, like, I don't know what I was doing. I mean, my wife was at that point 4 months pregnant. I'm talking about completely leaving one place that I was at for 7 years, really comfortable and just like embarking on this journey with this little breakfast concept that at that point had less restaurants and nothing. But anyway, Chris is a great guy and obviously a great friend to this day. And he really helped me out and made me feel welcome. And they did whatever they needed to do to make sure that, my wife, Lisa, was taken care of. And she was excited about the opportunity. And Yeah, it was pretty crazy. And actually thinking back to to NRA shows. So I took the job, I accepted like I guess in December or January. And my first day, they told me my starting day was February 20th, which is my birthday. And I was so nervous to tell him and call Chris and be like, hey man, it's my birthday. I was wondering if I could have it off. I just didn't call. I said, all right, cool. I'll start on my birthday. So my birthday and my anniversary are the same day here at First Watch.
I got 2 celebrations.
Exactly.
So how many properties do they have now? Because I know you've opened a lot, right? It's really a big growth right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we have 422 restaurants as of right now, which is just absolutely fantastic. And about 100 of those are here in Florida, and we stretch almost coast to coast. We actually don't have anything in California or Washington, Oregon. But Arizona is a strong state for us, 26 there, 50 in Texas, and 30 something in Colorado. So we're pretty widespread.
Wow. I know I live in Delray, Boca.
Yep.
I know you have a couple in Boca, and they just opened one in Delray within the year. So I got to get over there and see that.
Yeah, one of our busiest restaurants, Boca and Sunrise, both of them.
Really?
Yeah.
I know, in particular, my son, he loves that $1 million bacon that you have there, that candied bacon.
It's a good dish, man. You can't pass it up. You gotta have it. It's only, the perfect dish for the table.
Yeah, it's good. Awesome. So thinking back now that you're at this point in your career, was culinary school worth it? Was it instrumental? I mean, all the time and the money and everything, and that travel back and forth. I mean, tell us about that.
Yeah. For me, absolutely. For me, it was the perfect stepping stone. It was my foot in the door, to the Ritz-Carlton. It was the basics that I needed, the history of things. I love to know the why behind stuff, and culinary school absolutely gave me that. I think it also exposed me to lots of different people, just like you're going to come across in the industry, and culinary school, specifically Johnson & Wales, and then specifically Johnson & Wales in North Miami, was an extremely diverse campus. Because we were so close to the Caribbean, you had so many students from the Bahamas, from Jamaica, from Haiti. And so, for a kid who effectively grew up in a Catholic upbringing, Catholic school, it was really, really different, but it was really, really cool. And, for me in the industry, what I've learned and what I continue to try and teach or tell anyone who will listen in the culinary industry or the restaurant industry in general, there is no color, right? Their race doesn't really mean very much. Sexual orientation. Look, I was, living in Miami at, whatever years, the early 2000s, like none of those things mattered as long as you can hold your own during a shift, right? Mm-hmm. Who cares how poor you are, how rich you are, what color you are, what country you're from, what language you speak? None of it mattered if you can do the grind. If you can make it through the shift, then great. We're all friends. Yeah. And I think, that's something that really stuck out to me. And like I said, at the Ritz, I got to work next to people from all over the world. And same thing at school. You're making friends with kids from Puerto Rico or Barbados or whatever. And they've come from completely different backgrounds than you. But for me, it just solidified like how important it is to think about equality in the workplace. And you hear stories and you think about what's going on in the world, and the term racism is something that obviously is very top of mind for everyone right now. When you look at the industry, it's I would venture to say it's almost non-existent, or maybe it's over-existent. Everyone makes fun of everyone, and it doesn't come down to your race. It comes down to just like a brotherhood, right? So just like you'll make fun of your friends or your siblings and poke fun at them and things like that. I feel like that's what goes on in the industry. And I, for me personally, it made me a better human all around just from having that experience.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like brothers in arms in the military. You go to battle, it doesn't matter who you are. You got my back, I got yours. We got a job to do. And if you can keep up your own and trust each other, then all that other stuff goes out the window. It doesn't matter.
It really does. It doesn't matter, because on Saturday night at 7:30, who cares? Like, let's put this food out. Yeah.
Okay, what you do in your own time, what you do. Well, we got to get this. We have a shared objective here.
Yeah, and I think it was important. Like, if you're a hard worker and you're funny, you have a little bit of a sense of humor, like, you're going to be just fine in this industry. It doesn't matter if you're a boy or a girl or black or white or whatever. And
right.
Yeah, I worked for some pretty tough female chefs when I was at the Ritz, as a matter of fact, and they were awesome, but they did not take any crap at all from any of the guys. I mean, they were just as tough and foul-mouthed as anybody else. So
yeah, and it's like, even being a professor, a teacher, you're not criticizing the person, you're criticizing the job.
Yeah.
So if I had to do a practical exam for someone, you could be a great person, but this dish stinks.
Yeah.
You totally ruined it. So it's really not, you got to separate that.
Yeah.
The same way in the industry.
But I think it's important for people to be told that and let them learn and let them move on and evolve and make the next version of that dish that much better. I think that's super important.
Yeah. You said you got an A+ in my class?
I believe so. Yes, I did.
You have the transcript right there.
I have it right here. Stock, sauces, and soups.
Wow. What year was that?
A+. That was winter 2003, 2004.
2003, that's probably right when I started at Johnson & Wales. 18 years or so. So that was probably one of my first year starting there. So, wow.
Yeah, it was early. It was early on. Did you have, how many kids do you have?
Three boys.
Okay. Did you have, was one of them born in that general vicinity?
Yeah. My oldest is Jameson, and he is 19 now, 18, 19. He's a sophomore at UF up the University of Florida.
Yeah. So I seem to remember that you missed classes because your son was born.
Oh, shame on me.
I don't know, that stuck out in my mind for sure.
Yeah, probably did.
So I love that class. It was actually a lot of prep and a lot of knife work taught in that class, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
they kind of go hand in hand. In most culinary programs, curriculums, they have knife skills, because then you have a use for all those vegetables that you practice cutting. You make stocks and soups and purees and things out of it. So yeah, it was knife skills. Well, back then, the curriculum has changed 2 or 3 times. They don't even have that class anymore. Now it's culinary fundamentals or foundations, and they kind of blend those two in. It's
a sous vide class or something now, right?
Yeah, it's totally changed. I mean, even the college, it used to be the College of Culinary Arts. Now it's CFIT, College of Food Innovation and Technology. So it's really evolving, just like, the industry, I guess, the world.
Yep. Your class is my favorite class.
My class was the favorite class. Hands down. Cool. So what's next for you? I guess you're with this company. You got to continue it to grow. What's personally ready? Are you going back to school? You're still taking courses? What's next with you?
Yeah. Being here for 7 years and watching this company grow from 114 to over 400 has just been such a sweet ride. Like, it really is a cool job. And when I first took that corporate job at Melting Pot at 25, all my friends were still in the industry, and there was a lot of smack talking that went on, like, oh, you're a sellout, you're leaving, you can't handle the heat, and a lot of things were said early on there. But now all of them are like, hey, do you know anybody who's hiring in the corporate world? So it's cool, man. It's a really sweet gig, and I love the continued education I get. I make it a point to make that a big part of my role here. And I obviously have traditional responsibilities of R&D and menu item creation. We change our menu every 10 weeks, have a seasonal menu, and do a ton with fresh produce, fresh fruits and vegetables. Every single first watch across the country, juices fresh every morning, Fuji apples, English cucumber, kale, beets, turmeric, and whatever's in season, watermelon and pineapple right now. But so I really enjoy that side. I enjoy learning about supply chain, especially, and understanding where this food comes from and how it gets to the back door. And I take that part of my job pretty seriously. And I really use, I guess my platform or the First Watch platform to tell the story of those growers. And, we highlight our vendor partners quite often. I actually, right now we're running a watermelon juice. It's summertime, right? So we're juicing a lot of watermelon. Any given First Watch is going through about, I think it's like 50 to 60 watermelons per week. just for this juice, right? And we went down to Ponte, which is here on the west coast of Florida, and took our film crew with us to a place called Melon One, and basically went out into the watermelon field and filmed a ton of stuff. Just from, watermelons are hand harvested. Still to this day, there's no machine that's been created for it. So the work that goes into growing and watching out for them, and then harvesting and packing and shipping and making sure they get to where they're supposed to be. It's a massive dance, and a very important one. Obviously, not just to get watermelon to people, but like for Florida agriculture, I think, a lot of people just think Florida and they just think about the beaches, and they don't realize, like, when you look at the map of Florida, the beaches are just on the outside.
Yeah.
So you have all this land in the center of our state, and there's awesome growers. I do a lot of work at the Florida Strawberry Growers Association. Watermelon, obviously, tomatoes, oranges, of course, and I like to use, I guess, my voice to try and tell their story as much as we can. So you'll see it on our Instagram and in our website, and even on our menus right now. There's a little story about a couple watermelon growers that we met down there, Kyler and Rachel, and they're third and eighth generation Florida farmers, and it's just, I love that part of my job. So that is something that I you asked what I'm doing any continued education or still taking courses, not official courses through a university or anything online or anything like that. But like, I love to go out and spend a day or 2 days in Southern California with our avocado growers, Northern California for everything else, right? Spring mix and berries and just, I want to know where this product comes from. I want to know what goes into it being grown and harvested, packed, and shipped, so that when I go to our restaurants, I can open that box and I can explain to that cook or that manager, hey, here's what we should be looking for, and here's what this means, and here's what that means, and the colors and the feeling and the touch, the smell of things.
Yeah.
So I love that part of it all. We created our own coffee program here, and I go to Colombia, down to Colombia, a little place called Huila, every single year. We single origin source all of our coffee from this one place, and we partner with female growers down there and really just trying to help them better their lives. We have a great quality incentive program in place. So if their quality is of a certain degree, then they get a bonus at the end of the year. And we just developed and built these really cool programs that, unfortunately in the chain restaurant world, it's not that common, right? And I fought with this for a long time. As we continue to grow, I want to be viewed almost as the anti-chain. And when you think about chain restaurants, unfortunately, you think lower quality and in and out, really quick service, not great service. And I really hope that people look at us and yes, we have a lot of restaurants, so there's no arguing that. But I think if you look at our focus on quality, and you look at how we treat our people, and you look at our even in our corporate office, the supply chain strategies that we use, these are long-term relationships. We don't RFP product every year. We don't cut you out if you raise price. Like we understand and we see value in building those long-term relationships. So I really I enjoy that part of it. And now finally getting back on the road, I get to travel a little bit. So I do open restaurants here and there. We created an entire alcohol program and bar menu, which is something we'd never had before. And over the years, it's just been a really fun ride. You brought up $1 Million Bacon. We do these things, and we don't know how it's going to take off, right? And that's just become this ridiculous cult following that we can never take off the menu, even if we wanted to. And I think fresh juice is the same way. We wrote a cookbook a couple years ago, so I don't know. It's always something new. I never feel like I'm bored and like, oh well, we're just keep on plugging along and opening restaurants. Like it's more than that. There's so much like life and story to be told.
And that's so awesome that you showcase the vendors and the partners that you have out there, because they truly are partners. And a lot of restaurants, as you mentioned, are all thinking about the dollars. But really, it's like it starts with the vendor, right? With the growers, with the producers, and we're just the finisher, right? We just take that beautiful raw product and share it with the guests, right? By manipulating it in some way. But it really starts from that beginning.
Yeah, and I think I guess I've taken on my own shoulders. Like it's the way I see it, my responsibility to teach that to our managers and to our cooks, and to I don't know, help them or force them, I guess, have respect for that ingredient. see it as more than just a box of kale coming in the back door. Yeah, it's super important. Yeah, we're going to make money off of it from a profit margin standpoint, but like think all the way back. Avocados are a perfect example, right? We use a ton of fresh avocados, and it takes an avocado 14 months to grow to maturity and to be ready to harvest. So someone worked on that ranch, made sure that tree had enough water, pruned it, took care of it, loved it for 14 months to harvest it, pack it, send it to your restaurant. You have like 5 days to take care of it, man. Just take care of this baby for the last 5 days of its life before we make something out of it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's the story I tell about avocado.
Well, I feel their pain because I have an avocado tree right out back, Hospake, and I'm fighting the squirrels, the birds, the iguanas. I'm like, that's my avocado.
Yeah, exactly. I think of that on a massive scale, and we coined this phrase and use this strategy called "follow the sun." And what it means, we started talking about it probably like 5 years ago when everyone was saying, local this, local that. And we were getting some heat for not sourcing, quote unquote, locally. Right. Mm-hmm. And the way that I've always thought about it is, just because something's local doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best. Right. Yes, it's from right down the road, but at the same time, there are awesome producers and farmers all over this country. So the way that we look at it is we want to take from an area when it's the perfect time of year, right? So when that product is at its ripest, when it's most perfect. So in the wintertime, strawberries come from Florida, hands down, right? And I grew up here, born and raised. So for me, summer doesn't equal strawberries. It never has. It never clicked like that for me as a kid.
Right. It's like our tomatoes, right? Tomatoes in Florida.
Exactly. Yeah. Winter always meant strawberries for me. So when winter comes, we source all of our strawberries here in Florida and have a great partnership and ship those strawberries all over the country. But when the season changes, we go out to California. And during springtime and summertime, all the berries are coming from California. Then there's a short gap and we go down to Mexico because they're growing absolutely beautiful berries. And the same goes for avocados, right? There's a short season in California, Southern California, from like April to June, July. Once that changes, then we go down to Mexico. We source from Mexico. And if Mexico isn't great, then we go all the way down to Chile. And so understanding the seasons and where this product comes from, watermelon, great example, right? It starts in South Florida, start down there in Immokalee in the beginning of the summer, and it works its way all the way up through Florida, all the way up the coast, and then eventually finishes some in Texas and some up in New Jersey. But I respect, I think, more than anything, the produce side of the industry, and right. For us, over 40% of our spend is in fresh produce. Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, especially for a quote unquote chain restaurant. So I try and explain that to people and help them understand we're not like other chains or huge conglomerates. We still have a ton of resources and respect for people out in the field, and I try and spread that word as much as I possibly can.
That's great. Awesome. Now, you mentioned Instagram. So how can somebody follow you if they want to get in touch with you or they want to see what's happening at First Watch, or they want to, kind of follow along? Maybe you could share some of your social media, links, addresses. I can put it in the show notes, but you go ahead and, speak to it now.
Yeah, sure. So Instagram is first.watch, and it's awesome, man. So much cool content. We have so much fun with it. And it's wild to see what people gravitate towards and what photos or what stories we put up that get the most likes and comments. We do usually with each seasonal menu, we do a great giveaway with one of our suppliers, right? This year, or this season rather, it's with watermelon.org, which is the Watermelon Growers Board. And it's just cool. That, in my opinion, is the best and fastest way to tell a story, right? Because everyone's on there, they're scrolling through. They don't want to watch a 3 or 4 minute video. They want little clips. And if something catches their eye, then they'll dig deeper and go find more information. So you can go to our website, which is firstwatch.com. There's a lot of information on there. We have a blog post that's on there. We tell the story of our coffee growers in Colombia, or watermelon farmers here in Florida, or cheesemaker in Wisconsin, or whatever it is. But yeah, that would be the two easiest ways. We're, of course, on Facebook as well. So First Watch would be the handle there.
And I'm assuming you're hiring as well. I mean, a lot of places are right now. So can they find where to get employment on the website?
Jeff, send me your resume. I'll hook you up, man. Yeah, of course. We're hiring. If you go to firstwatch.com/careers, it will take you down the right road. It'll help you pick a location based on where you are in the country, and then give you a listing actually of all the positions that are open. And if you select Sarasota or Bradenton, Florida, it'll give you all the corporate office jobs as well. So we're I don't know if you can see behind me here, but my office is like completely cleared out. So next week we are moving to a brand new office right up the road. It's absolutely beautiful. It's right off 75. So if you're going 75 south, right before exit 220, you'll see this massive Taj Mahal of an office that we've been building for the last year and a half. So we're really excited to get in there and have everybody under one roof again.
Wow, awesome!
Yeah.
Great. So I'll put all those links into the show notes. So if someone's listening and they want to, go back to that and find out how to get in touch, they'll be able to find that. And then, as we come to the end here, towards our end, wrapping up, is there any last minute advice or guidance that you want to leave with the listeners? I mean, if someone wanted to go to culinary school, wanted to enter into this industry, or wanted to do something, what would you tell them? How would you advise them?
I had the opportunity when I was at Melting Pot, and I still do to this day, to go and speak to a lot of high school culinary programs, especially in Tampa. We're pretty well known up there. Chamberlain program's awesome. Lato High is fantastic. And, I made friends with those instructors over the years, and they would always ask me to come and speak. And I think early on, I was like, why do these kids even care? But then I realized, I was young and I looked like them, right? I had full sleeves and tattoos, and they could relate to me. And it wasn't like a celebrity chef coming in or an older guy or girl coming in. So, over the years, I kind of had to think real hard, like I could have a serious impact on these kids' lives. So what do I want to say to them? And what continued to come up for me, and it's something I didn't really have the opportunity to do until I got older and took these corporate jobs. But I would say leave, go travel, go see the world. It'll make you a better person. It'll teach you how to be humble. I've been very fortunate to see so many different countries, and these are trips where I don't go and stay at the Ritz-Carlton. These are trips like Colombia. Like I go deep into the jungle, and you can watch some of those videos. We publish those videos on our website. But I think that's such an important part of everyone's like personal development, right? Go travel the world. Even if you have to wash dishes somewhere, go wash dishes somewhere. Make just enough money to survive and to experience, just sit in a park and eat a baguette in France or whatever. Like those little things will pay dividends in the long run. And just the way you treat other people, the stories you have to tell, I think that's a really big part of everyone's growth that I don't think is stressed as much. And I know, for me, I didn't do it because I had a girlfriend and I didn't want to leave and all these reasons, right? Leave that girlfriend or bring her with you or whatever you need to do. But like, I think that's a really important part of development as a cook or as a human in general, but especially as a cook or a chef, if that's what you want to do in your career, go see the world. And you don't have to work in the best restaurant in the capital city of every country. Just go work at a pizza place. Like, learn about the dough, learn about the sauce, whatever. Go work at a seafood restaurant, butcher and take apart tons and tons of fish every single day. Like you'll be a better person for it. So that's my first part of advice. And I think, my second, to your point, is culinary school, right? I think absolutely if this is your path in life and you want to get the basics down, you want to get your foot in the door somewhere, 100%. Johnson & Wales was an amazing place for me personally. I really enjoyed my time there. I made some great lifelong friends, and I certainly would not be where I am today had I not gone there. And some doors opened for me, some unique opportunities because of people I met through Johnson & Wales. Like I said, Chef was a JWU graduate from Providence, and he gave me this opportunity, and he knew I was going to Johnson & Wales, and I think all these doors opened for me. It's very likely can be traced back to my time at Johnson & Wales. Once that door is open, it's up to you to step through it and do whatever you're going to do on the other side. But I truly believe that, for me, Johnson & Wales opened that first door and got me rolling on this path.
Yeah, so true. If this experience matters, travel, you don't even know what it's going to pay off later on. And, and it's just lifelong learning, go to school, study, take classes.
Yeah.
And if you can't, there's so many online opportunities now, or just, experiences like you do. Go talk to a vendor and go work for a while and gain the practical experience. Well, that is just about all the time we have for this episode. I want to first thank you, Shane, for coming on the show today and sharing your culinary school story with all of us. We really appreciate your time, your insight, and your honesty, and all the stories that you shared with us and the listeners.
Thanks so much for having me, Chef. I greatly appreciate it. And I value my time at Johnson & Wales and the time I spent together with you. And thanks for reaching out. I love telling the story.
Awesome. Thank you very much. See you later now. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Chef.
And a big thanks and appreciation also goes out to all of you, the listeners. We hope you enjoy the show and this episode. You all are a big part of this show, so please let us know what you think. Your comments are always welcome, and they help us in making the best show possible. You can email them to culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com. That's culinaryschoolstories@gmail.com. Or even leave us a voicemail at area code 207-835-1275. That's area code 207-835-1275. And if you like the show, we have a big ask of all of you, and that is to share the podcast with everyone you know and to give us a positive rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Okay, until our next Culinary School Story, take care and be well. Bye-bye. Culinary School Stories is a proud member of the Food Media Network.